Good evening. Welcome to SVN3E, Environmental Science, Grade 11. We are on lesson 20 tonight. The last few lessons we've done have been looking at biodiversity, which is a variety of plants and animals, fungi, bacteria, in an area that helps support the area no matter what comes along, whether it's a global warming, whether it's one of the species dies, is affected by some sort of bacteria or virus maybe, and the rest of the ecosystem is able to carry on because it has a variety of different plants and animals to be the producers, the organisms that capture the sunlight, to be the uh, consumers. They eat the producers, other consumers that eat those. If one of those in the food chain um, is affected, the rest of the food chain, the rest of the ecosystem can carry on because it is biodiversity. All right, actually, that biodiversity is one of Canada's natural resources, right? Our plants and animals we have, many are unique just to Canada. We also talked about how some are endangered. Um, we've had examples of species going extinct, which we really don't want. That's when an plant or animal no longer exists on the planet. And it leaves a hole. It leaves a hole in the food chain, the ecosystem, and we know that all ecosystems are dependent on each other. So it's very important to support biodiversity, and we've done a lot of work on that. We're going to kind of continue with Canada's natural resources, but we're going to just really focus on what the natural resources are in Canada and looking at the renewable and non-renewable resources. If you remember from last time, we talked about non-renewable and renewable. Renewable means it can be replaced. We can grow it, right? It's something that can be replaced. We're not going to run out of it. Non-renewable are things like the fossil fuels. Once we run out of them, they're gone. They're gone, and there's no longer any, we can no longer use that fuel. Some of the things we use for energy are very dangerous to the environment. They've caused pollution, global warming, the greenhouse gases we produce, for example, other toxins. And so renewable resources are a way that perhaps we can um, help to make healthier choices for our ecosystems, make them more sustainable. Okay, so we're going to start here in the booklet, and we're going to go to our learning expectations here for lesson 20. It says students will be able to identify and describe several natural resources in Canada, describe common methods for resource exploitation in Canada, describe environmental issues with each method, and identify and describe the challenges in resource management in Canada. So you see, we're heavy into resource management. We actually have three different lessons in lesson 20. They're all, the questions for lesson 20 are listed there below on page 14 and 15, and you'll see there's three different sets of them. So there's three different sections of the textbook that we will be going to talk about lesson 20. And we're going to go over and do that right now. I'm going to start by introducing the unit. It's chapter 7 in the textbook, not the unit, sorry, the lesson. Chapter 7 in the textbook uh, is using natural resources. Um, and we're going to do that with sustainable practices. Always sustainable, right? We want our future ecosystems to be healthy. Okay. The right to water. You'll see somebody there holding their hands under a water tap there. And then in the next picture, you see there's a lock on it. So water is probably one of Canada's most important natural resources. And there's a lot of talk about the right to clean water right now. The United Nations have argued that access to clean water should be a human right. They estimate that each person on Earth needs an estimated 20 to 50 liters of water a day to meet their basic needs. Yet in this case, it was 1.1 billion people lack access to an adequate supply of water. So why is that, you might ask, if we have all this water on the planet? So Earth's under threat from human-made pollution and large corporations that buy up the water. So we've talked a lot about producing electricity, mining, all these different ways that we need water, and we know that water is important. Hydroelectric dams, all of these different things. Water is so important. And we know that you have to be careful about where you get the water from. And if you are using it and it gets hot, or it has toxins or anything like that, and after use, it has to be cleaned before it can be returned to before you can return it to the source, the river, the pond, the lake where you got it. Okay, so that's a little um, opener to one of the most important natural resources we have, and that is water. Okay, we're going to go over, we're on page 171 of the textbook, section 7.1, Canada's natural resources. Okay, so it says here, I love the textbook in that it has always some really good definitions. It said a natural resource is a source of wealth that occurs naturally and has economic value. I suppose if it's a source of wealth, it does have economic value. Um, so we have lots of different natural resources that we just talked about, and we're going to go through those natural resources in this section here. And we're going to just talk about what all some of Canada's natural resources. So we're going to start by looking at the renewable natural resources in Canada. And we know it can only be renewable if we can replace it. Okay, so number one, Canadian fisheries. We've talked a bit about fisheries in the course. We've talked a little bit about aquaculture, which is where fisheries grow fish. Um, I don't know that we've really talked about what they do with it. Um, it says Canada's coastline is 29,000 kilometers long. It has lakes and rivers that contain more than half of the world's fresh water. Okay, so we are rich in fresh water in Canada. Also, we have fishing grounds, places where fish grow. And so two of those are off the coast of Canada, eastern side of Canada, over in the Atlantic. Okay. And so we export fish. We catch fish in our what we consider our territorial grounds, and we send it to other places in the world. Um, so an exporter is somebody who sells their product to other countries, and we export fish. So we catch fish from oceans, rivers, lakes, but we also have fish farms. And these are places where they have big ponds. They're controlled. They control the temperature, the food supply, and all of that type of thing. And they grow fish. Um, there are over 640 aquaculture businesses. Aquaculture is a fish farm, and they raise everything um, from salmon, trout, mussels, oysters. Okay, so all sorts of different things. I know there's more than those. Those are the ones kind of mentioned in this reading. Um, and in table 7.1, they show the top exported fish. Lobster leads the pack by quite a bit. Um, there, 44,000 tons of lobster were exported. Snow and queen crab, next on the list, salmon, Atlantic salmon, shrimp, and herring. Okay, those would all be in the ocean. You can also get fish such as in our neck of the woods, right? You have pickerel, and we can get these from Aboriginal fisheries in the area. Not so much fisheries, but Aboriginal businesses that go out and catch the fish and then package it up and sell it. There's also Aboriginal fisheries. We also have recreational fishers that just catch all sorts of different fish, right? That's a big thing in our area. And tourism to come in and catch those fish is huge. They would want to catch walleye is what they would call it, which is to us could be called pickerel, trout fish, bass, others. Those are what people pay big money to come into Canada and go fishing. Um, and we have people who are living off the fish they catch, right? A lot of Aboriginal communities have been fishing for thousands of years, and that's part of a main part of their diet. And they go fishing, catch their fish, and then they uh, survive off that. Okay. Um, it's a our ecosystems are complicated, but aquatic ecosystems are really complicated. And fish are very entwined, right, with aquatic ecosystems. That's where they live. And so we need a wide variety of fish. We need biodiversity of fish in order to keep those ecosystems healthy. Um, so that you can see how fish are an important Canadian resource. Okay, wildlife. If we look on page 172, we can see that uh, we have some gentlemen playing hand drums. Those are Aboriginal people. This group here is from the Northwest Territories, and they're playing a drum song to thank the land for its gifts during a seasonal caribou hunt. And a caribou could provide everything from food, clothing, shelter, art, works of art. So all of these are um, examples of all of these are examples of ways that they use their wildlife. We have a lot of wildlife in Canada. We have black bears, beetles, deer. Um, we have falcons, eagles. We have a variety of animals. And that's one way that we get people to come to our part of the world is for tourism. People will pay money to go up to northern Manitoba to see polar bears. Maybe you will be out in the western part of the province and see uh, Banff National Park and go see some of all sorts of wildlife out there. And we'll see that there's biodiversity all over Canada and that we can get food and we can get them for tourism and we can get use wildlife as a resource in many different ways. Okay, so that wildlife is another type of resource. So I thought we would pause there for a minute, and I'm just going to go down to our website and give me 1 second. Gonna go look at some other examples. We have such a rich wildlife, fish and wildlife. So Canadian fish resources, let's have a look at those for starters. Let's see. And we're gonna just have a look because we're very lucky in our part of the world, aren't we? To have such wonderful resources that there we go. So we know that fishery can go from there's some Aboriginal fisheries here. Let's look at this one. Okay, let's just there we go. Okay, so we have Canada's diverse wildlife. And you'll see that there's lots of ways that people are trying to preserve wildlife. So let's go through some of these examples here. All right, so um, Canada's diverse wildlife includes large animals like moose, polar bears, grizzly bears, bison. And there's also in the oceans, we have beluga whales, seals, dolphins. And we have in the Arctic, we have muskox, Arctic fox. There's all sorts of different forms of wildlife. The moose, we have moose. Moose is a type of wildlife that you can go and see some of you can go look at them, you can go hunt them. Um, all parts of the moose can be used. Um, there's bison, which I've eaten bison, so I know you can eat bison. And you have bears. There's a variety of bears all over Canada. Polar bears, grizzly bears, wolves and coyotes. Okay, so we have the larger mammals, which can be used for food and all the other things that we talked about, as well as for tourism. We have marine and Arctic wildlife. So off the coastal waters, we have walruses, dolphins, seals, sea turtles, whales, sharks. And then in the Arctic, we have specifically reindeer, polar bears, all the Arctic animals, Arctic foxes, Arctic hares, and lemmings. And we have so many bird species. Snowy owl, woolly ptarmigan, snow bunting, Arctic tern. So you can see that we have such a variety of wildlife. We're very lucky. You can look to the ultimate wildlife in Canada bucket list. You can see here we have a seal, we have some puffins in Newfoundland, right? We have reindeer, polar bear, moose. We have narwhals. There's some narwhals at the bottom with the horn. There's a bison. Um, there's killer whales, orcas. So you can see that we're very lucky. We all of the different types of wildlife in Canada. You'll see that this one's got the top things to go see in wildlife. So polar bears in Churchill is at the top of the list. Narwhals in the Arctic. It's just taking a moment to load up. Give it a sec. And then we will come down here. Spirit bears. I'm not sure what spirit bears are. is also known as the ghost bear. It's a rare species of black bear that is born with white fur. Well, there you go. Let's go look and see what is. Oh, there they are there. They kind of look like a grizzly with white fur. That's kind of cool, isn't it? And up here are narwhals. Those are incredible. Incredible. I'd love to see one of those. Um, and there's orcas off the coast of British Columbia. Puffins, there they are there. Those are the puffins in Newfoundland and Labrador. Okay, so those are some more wildlife species. There's humpback whales in the St. Lawrence River. There's a group of people going to see the humpback whales. Caribou in Northwest Territories, Yellowknife. Okay, so those are Inuit people would live in that area of Canada, and they would also use not just for tourism. Okay, so that's our list of wildlife. And let's just go to one more. Let's just do the fish in Canada. Let's go see if we can just see a little bit of those. Here we go. Okay, just one sec. There we go. So you can, oops, sorry, didn't go to the right one. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to find my fish. There we go. Okay. So, see what we're sharing here now. Yep, there's the fish. Okay, Canada's a wide variety of fish. We've already named a few of these. Northern pike, walleye, trout, and bass. And you'll see that there's some really good pictures there of fish. I'm going to just go to this one here. And you'll see there we've got some of the freshwater fish in Canada here. Okay, we'll come down here and look at them. There we go. We see up in the top left is the muskie. There's a northern pike, lake trout, rainbow trout, chain pickerel, yellow perch. Okay, those are walleyes way down in the bottom. That's our most famous. Here's some marine fish. We've got the Atlantic cod, the Pacific halibut, haddock, Pacific cod. Okay, so you'll see those are some of the Pacific fish. Albacore tuna, sockeye salmon, Atlantic mackerel, Pacific herring, rainbow smelt. All of those are Canadian fish. And there is, looks, I would say that looks possibly a walleye there. There's a big school of fish. Okie doke. So there's some of the fish. Those are some of the resources that we have here in Canada for fish and wildlife. Alrighty, we're going to go back to our next topic. And we're going to go to forests. Okay, another big resource we have in Canada is forests. Much of Canada's surface is covered in forests. And we know that we make good use of those forests. And we know that they cover a large part of Canada and they're an important resource. So we can see here that they say they represent 10% of the world's forests and 30% of the world's boreal forests. And we talked just in the last few days about how Canadian forests are called the lungs of the North because they produce a lot of oxygen. So not only are they important for products, they are also important that they are producing oxygen. That's what plants do, right? And so they could be used as a resource as well. Canada exports, remember, sends to other countries forest products. And we were the world's largest exporter. However, I'm not sure with things going on in the United States if we still are. But we originally did send products to the United States, Asia, and Europe. We mostly have softwood trees. Those are coniferous, right? Trees with needles. Pine trees, spruce trees, hemlock, cedar. Um, and that's mostly in our part of the world, right? However, we do have hardwood trees. Those are trees with leaves. So there's oak trees, beech trees, ash, maple, etc. More in the eastern part of Canada and the southern part of Canada. Um, Hardwood trees also produce apples, walnuts, that type of thing. Softwood trees um, have pine cones. And hardwood and softwood originally came from the people who came and were logging in this part of the world. And they based the classification and how hard it was to cut the wood. So they just are a general grouping of how we group them, but not everything might fit perfectly into those categories. We can see on page 173 at figure 7.3, they have softwood, mixed wood, and hardwood, and they show you the total areas. You'll see the softwoods take up the majority of area in Canada, covering almost, and you'll see this is a really neat thing to look at. You'll see where the softwood trees end. That's known as the tree line. And above that, you have what's called tundra. They don't actually have a lot of trees north of that tree line. And I have been to areas where where you go and there is a tree line, and it's quite fascinating. Okay. Um, So not only do people come to or not only do we use the forests in Canada as a resource to be exported or to turn into products, it's also where a lot of our biodiversity, most of our biodiversity comes from, is these areas where there is forest. And 2/3 of all species in Canada are related to the forest habitats, okay? So wildlife, fishery, and forest resources are all interconnected. They're all based on each other. And so it's really important when we develop one of these resources that we keep in mind that they are interconnected and that we are careful to take care of them, which brings us to water. 9% of Canada is covered by fresh water. Doesn't seem like it seems like more, doesn't it, in some of the areas? But anyway, it's only 9%. We have about 25% of the entire world's wetlands. Remember, wetlands are areas where plants and animals, birds, fish all grow. Okay, so most of the wetlands in the world, or not most of them, I mean 25% of them are here in Canada. And the Great Lakes support 25% of Canadian agriculture. I did not realize that. When I think of agriculture, I think of the Western provinces, but obviously it's quite a bit in the Southern Ontario. Okay, so we know that there's different types of water. We've discussed that right in our first unit when we were talking about the three spheres. So we know that we can have the surface water, right? And that can be fresh surface water. Those would be rivers, lakes, ponds, rivers. Aquifers are storehouses of fresh water. They're underground, and groundwater can be pumped out of those areas. That's where we call the water under the ground, right? Groundwater. It says here there's more water underground in Canada than above. So that's really important. And that if we're putting toxins into the ground, into soil, etc., that we are careful that it's not going to be where people are getting their drinking water out of. Okay, so it's always really important to consider what pollutants, what toxins we're putting into the environment and where they're going, not just dumping it and leaving it for somebody else's problem, right? Biggest concentrations of groundwater are near the top level of aquifers, and that's called the water table. So let's go over to page 174. We're going to look at figure 7.4. You'll see there that this is the percentage of people using groundwater resources. All right, so um, you'll see that um, the arrows pointing down, or the triangle pointing downwards, is 0 to 25% of the people. You'll see there's lots of those all over Canada. So at least a quarter of the people are using groundwater in most municipalities. 26 to 50%, and you can see the really large cities, right? It looks like Toronto area, over in looks like Vancouver. Okay, those areas. 51 to 75%. Is there a few spots there? Lots in Quebec. Quebec seems to be the majority of those. And starred areas, you'll see some scattered places throughout the prairies, Northern Ontario, that 76 to 100% of the water is coming from the groundwater. So that tells us that most Canadians rely on surface water for drinking, but 26% of Canadians rely on aquifers for their drinking water. If you look over at Prince Edward Island, you'll see that aquifers supply all of the drinking water for Prince Edward Island. We also use water, of course, for drinking, not only drinking water and washing our clothes and bathing and all the other things we do, but we also use it for livestock, like cows, crops, watering crops, for our fish farms, and then, of course, for some of the industries. Remember, mining, we use water in mining, getting out fossil fuels. Okay, so those are some of the other ways that we use those. All right. Um, we are on page 174. Here's our first check your understanding question. It's question 1. What is the difference between aquaculture and agriculture? And that's kind of a question we've looked at before. It's worth 2 marks. So if you even described one and then the other that would probably be a good way to answer that question. All right, bottom of page 174 in the textbook, Non-Renewable Resources in Canada. So we are looking at fossil fuels now, right? That's our biggest one here. Fossil fuels are oil, natural gas, coal, right? Um, Canada has fossil fuels. And remember that fossil fuels are from ancient plants and animals under intense pressure over a very long time, can be turned into solids, liquids, or gases that can be used as fuel. And we've already said there's coal, crude oil, natural gas, bitumen. Those are all examples of fossil fuels. Bitumen is a solid or a thick liquid, and it's what's found in the oil sands of Alberta. The oil sands of Alberta is a source of fossil fuel. Okay, so if we go to the top of page 175, you'll see there, figure 7.5 is oil reserves found in Alberta. And it was discovered in 1947. It's been around for a long time. And it led to a lot of money in that part of the world being able to exploit that find there. Coal. Canada has 4% of the world's coal resources. Most of them are out in Western Canada. But we do have some off the coast of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So it's another place where you could see um, some of the oil rigs, right, where they're trying to extract those from the ocean. Um, Coal is still being used in Canada, but we know that we're trying to reduce it. In Ontario, we have stopped using coal. We no longer use coal to produce energy for electricity. So, however, we still do have coal resources in Canada. The problem with coal, of course, is that when you burn it, it produces a lot of pollution, a lot of greenhouse gases, and it is not healthy for the environment. Oil and natural gas, and then bitumen, right? The thick solid or thick liquid, um, is um, most of Canada's natural resources when it comes to fossil fuels. Um, There's 30,000 oil and gas wells in Canada, and those are on the land and at sea, right? They're mostly on Crown land. That's Crown land means land that's owned by the government. Okay. And if you look on figure 7.6, it shows where the oil and gas are currently being extracted in Canada. So it says the producing areas, that's the lighter colored shading, potential areas, and then you can see the dark shading out west is the oil sands there, where the oil and gas are being extracted. We are the seventh larger oil produced in the world, and we export more oil and gas than we bring in. So that's really good because it allows us to be a little bit more independent. Most of it goes to the United States. Um, we'll talk more about that later. I'm not sure what the effect the current political climate's having on that. If we are still, what agreement's still in place for that? There's been a lot of things that have come into play politically in the last little bit. So, okay, there's one other area of natural resources oh, sorry, I forgot. We're on page 176 at the top. And question one says list three non-renewable energy, not energy, sorry, non-renewable. We talk so much about non-renewable and renewable energy. Non-renewable resources in Canada. Okay, so that's at the top of page 176. Um, if we look there at the top of page 176 as well, we get to the last resource, the last Canadian resource we're going to discuss today, and that's minerals and metals and mining, right? Um, we have over 100 mining communities across Canada. Okay, a mineral is a naturally occurring solid that formed as a result of geological processes. Again, these are things that are found through mining. We have salt mines, diamond, potash, gold mines. We have a lot of different types of mines across Canada. And we've got in the chart on page 176, you can see that they talk about the mineral or metal and where it's found in Canada. Copper is in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, and British Columbia. Gold, Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, the Yukon Territory, and British Columbia. Iron ore is in Quebec, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Lead, New Brunswick. Nickel, Ontario, and Manitoba. Most people who have driven through Sudbury know that they have a big nickel there. It's you can tell by the landscape that they've done a lot of strip mining in that area, and it almost looks like you're kind of on the moon in certain areas going through there. Potash, Saskatchewan, if you travel through Saskatchewan, even just on the Trans-Canada Highway, you'll see when you come to the potash area, it looks like it's snow. but it's actually just a white mineral called potash that they use for fertilizers and other things. Salt is mined in Nova Scotia. Uranium in Saskatchewan. Do you remember what we use for uranium for? Yep, uranium is mined for nuclear fuel. That's what we use to begin a nuclear reaction is uranium. Zinc is found in New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba. So these are all minerals and metals that are mined. You can see figure 7.7, the Northwest Territories is becoming famous for its diamonds, and there you go there. This mine, the Diavik diamond mine, is located on an island in Lac de Gras, which is 300 kilometers by air from Yellowknife. We know in our part of the world, we have the Ring of Fire. So I thought we could just have a quick look at that. And let's just have a look at Ring of Fire, Northwestern Ontario. And just get a nice diagram. There we go. So if we look there, you'll see the Ring of Fire mining claims right there, and it is way up, right in the middle of Northwestern Ontario. You'll see there's communities all around it there. So that is an area where they are doing a lot of mining. It refers to geographical area. Um, it has discoveries of chromite, nickel, copper, gold, zinc, and palladium. The name Ring of Fire is said to have been coined by Noront Resources founder Richard Nemes at the first discovery. But it says, in fact, the nickname was first suggested by financier Robert Cudney in reference to the Johnny Cash song. There you go. Okay, so we know that that a lot of people in our area, I'm just going to Musselwhite. Here's Musselwhite Mine. There's a picture of it there. About us. So it says our people. There's Mr. Simpson, the president. Etienne Morin. These are just all people who work for Musselwhite. Doesn't really go with any of that. I was hoping to get some of the more First Nation aspect of it, but it is not. A lot of the people who work there are First Nation, so that's Musselwhite Mine. Okay, back to our textbook. We are on page 177 at the bottom and doing the review questions now. So we'll see there on page 177, we want to do the review questions at the bottom of the page there. Question 5 is the first review question, and it's an opinion question. It says, describe which of Canada's renewable natural resources you think is the most valuable. So just renewable, not non-renewable. And it says, why do you think that? So in this particular case, you need to give 2 parts to the question. You need to start by deciding which of the resources is most valuable. So let's just quickly review them. Do you believe the resource is the fisheries, the Canadian fisheries, wildlife in Canada, the forests in Canada, water in Canada? Those are the renewable resources. And which of those do you think is the most valuable? So explain that for starters. And then why do you believe that? So it's an opinion question. And to tell you the truth, as long as you come up and you pick one of those resources and then give me some reason why you believe that that resource is important, then you will get the 2 marks, okay? All right. The last question on page 177 we're going to do is explain the differences and similarities between bitumen, coal, and natural gas. All right, so you want it differences and similarities, so a half mark for each. So you want to give 6 points, it's worth 3 marks. So what's the difference between bitumen, coal, and natural gas? Okay, that's one thing you can put down. And then you want to come up with similarities between them. And that's worth 3 marks with a half mark for 3 differences and a half mark for 3 similarities, okay? If you can't remember what they are, go back to page 174 and 175. You'll see that there's a lot of information on each of them. Just go through and read those 2 pages and you'll come up um, I'm sure you'll come up with some similarities and differences there. Okay, I'm just going to go back for a minute and we're going to go back to the booklet. I just want to show you something here before we um, finish off. Okay, and there we go. Okay, so we're over in lesson 20. So you'll see lesson 20 key questions. Check your understanding questions we've done, page 174. Page 176 we've done, and the review questions on page 177 we just did. Now you'll notice that there's still more questions. Those are related to the next section of the textbook, okay? So there's still 2 more sections related to lesson 20. Usually each section of the textbook is related to 1 lesson. But in this particular lesson, we're putting everything to do on Canada's natural resources into 1 lesson. So our next class, we will be talking about methods for extracting Canada's natural resources. So we've talked a little bit about this in other lessons where we've talked about how we don't destroy the 3 spheres, water, um, air, and soil, by getting the natural resources, whether it's mining or whether it's fishing, hunting, all those types of things. We know that we have to be super careful about how we get those resources. So 7.2 is going to take all the resources we just talked about, and we're going to look at how we can try to use those resources without damaging the ecosystem where they're found. So that'll be the second part of lesson 20. And then we have one more section of lesson 20, and that is starting over on page 186, and that's managing Canada's natural resources. We want to make sure that we have our resources around for a long time. We want our future generations to have these resources that they can use. But in order to do that, we have to be better at how we get these resources and how we're leaving the ecosystem after we get the resources. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we go in and study areas. We talked a lot about that in our biodiversity work, right? We talked about how we can use methods to measure and sample resources. Biodiversity is important. And so we have a lot of methods of going in and checking samples of ecosystems and seeing if there's biodiversity in those ecosystems, okay? So we're going to talk a lot in 7.3 about the ways that we can continue that work, ways that we can get samples, but also access the resources, right? We need to make money from resources in order for our country to be able to support its citizens. And it's important that we do that in a proper way that allows us to keep our resources um, useful for future generations and also to keep the ecosystems sustainable. So two big jobs. So that is going to be the rest of lesson 20. And then we will hopefully finish off at the end of the week with our last lesson, which will be a review in preparing for the exam. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next class.